Daniel's life on the orbital station was not one of glory. He was a janitor, the kind of worker most people never noticed, yet his hands touched every corridor, every hall, every piece of polished floor that the wealthy aliens walked upon. He wore the same gray uniform every day, plain and practical, with a small patch that marked him as maintenance crew. To the galaxy's richest and most powerful, he was invisible. But Daniel didn't mind. He liked quiet work. The orbital station itself was a marvel, built by the richest alien houses hanging in the darkness of space like a jeweled crown. Its walls glittered with alloyed crystal, and every chamber was filled with luxury. The aliens who owned it were tall, elegant, and proud, their skin shimmering faintly with colors that shifted in light. They looked at humans as if they were simple tools, useful for labor but unworthy of attention. Daniel had learned to stay out of sight. He cleaned after banquets, polished the endless marble-like floors, and repaired small leaks or broken lights. He did his job carefully and without complaint. Most nights he worked alone. He preferred it that way. On this particular evening, he was scrubbing the floor of a grand corridor leading to the private quarters of the elite. The halls were quiet, save for the soft hum of air systems and the distant thrum of the station's reactors. His mop moved back and forth with rhythm, and his mind wandered to old memories of Earth, fields, rain, and the smell of fresh bread from his mother's kitchen. Then he heard something strange. At first it was faint, almost lost in the silence, a muffled sound like a whimper. Daniel paused, raising his head. The sound came again, soft crying, weak and broken. It came from behind one of the tall doors at the end of the hall, doors that were not meant for someone like him. He stood still, his hand gripping the mop handle. He knew the rules. Maintenance workers were not supposed to step into private chambers unless summoned. Breaking that rule could mean punishment or being dismissed from the station. But the sound continued, more desperate now. A child's sob mixed with a sharp thud like something falling. Daniel's chest tightened. He leaned his mop against the wall, hesitated only a moment, and walked toward the door. When it slid open, he expected to be confronted by guards or alarms. Instead, he stepped into a softly lit chamber lined with golden pillars and flowing drapes that shimmered like liquid metal. In the center of the room, he saw a small figure. It was an alien child. The child sat in a floating chair that hummed quietly as it kept balance. One of its wheels had caught on a fallen tray and spilled food spread across the floor. Fruits glowing faintly, liquid shimmering in strange hues. The child's hands trembled as it tried to clean the mess, but its small body shook too much. Its eyes were wide and wet with tears. Daniel's heart clenched. He saw no servants, no caretakers, no one, only the child. "Hey, it's okay," Daniel said softly, though he knew the child might not even understand English. He crouched down and slowly picked up the fallen tray, careful not to startle the little one. The child blinked at him, sniffling, watching with suspicion and confusion. Daniel pulled a cloth from his pocket and began wiping the floor. His movements were steady and calm, the same way he used to help his younger sister back home when she spilled something. He cleaned without rushing, without frowning. The child tilted its head, eyes following every motion. When Daniel looked up, he smiled a little, gentle and reassuring. "See? Nothing to worry about. We'll fix this." To his surprise, the child gave a tiny sound, a short laugh between the sniffles. It was weak but real. Daniel chuckled softly in return and kept working until the floor was spotless. When he finished, he noticed the child still had food smeared on its hands. Without hesitation, he pulled a clean cloth from his belt and carefully reached forward. "Here, let me help," he murmured, wiping the small alien fingers the way one might help any child. For a moment, the child just stared at him. Then, to Daniel's astonishment, the child smiled. A true smile, bright and unguarded, something innocent and pure. Daniel's chest warmed. He didn't know who this child was or why it was alone, but in that instant, none of that mattered. All he saw was a kid who needed help, and he had given it, What Daniel did not know was that someone else had been watching. High above the chamber, half hidden in the shadows of a balcony, stood Lady Soraya, the child's mother. She was not only a mother, but also one of the richest and most powerful figures in the sector. Her wealth built trade routes, funded fleets, and bent entire councils to her will. She was feared, admired, and envied. But now, as she watched unseen, her gaze was fixed not on her riches nor her rivals, but on the janitor crouched before her child. Her daughter, frail since birth, had never smiled easily. Caretakers treated her with stiffness, servants with fear, and relatives with pity. Joy was rare, but here before her eyes the human janitor, a man with nothing, had drawn laughter from her child with nothing more than patience and kindness. Soraya's lips parted slightly. She felt something stir within her chest, something she had nearly forgotten long ago. She said nothing, gave no sign of her presence. She simply watched in silence as the human picked up his mop again, nodded kindly to her daughter, and left the chamber without asking for reward or recognition. When the door closed behind him, Soraya stepped down from the balcony. Her daughter still smiled faintly, whispering a sound that resembled friend. The alien billionaire stood there quietly, shaken in a way she hadn't felt in years. A simple human janitor had just done what her wealth and power never could, and she knew this was only the beginning. Lady Soraya was a woman of power. Entire fleets answered her call, her wealth stretched across star systems, and her name alone could silence rival houses in the council. She was known for being cold, sharp, and impossible to sway. Her empire was built on precision, strength, and an iron reputation. No one ever thought of her as soft. No one dared to. But the image of the human janitor helping her daughter refused to leave her mind. She had stood in the shadows of the chamber and watched carefully. He had not known she was there. He had no reason to act kindly, no motive to impress, no ambition to win favor, yet he had stepped forward with calm and patience, as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy to kneel before a frightened child and wipe her tears. That moment unsettled Soraya more than any political threat she had faced. For years, she had surrounded her daughter with the best caretakers money could buy. Trained nurses, tutors, healers, all sworn to protect and serve. Yet her daughter rarely smiled, rarely laughed. She often sat in silence, withdrawn and weary, as if the weight of her disability made the entire world feel heavy. But one human janitor, an invisible worker in gray, had managed in minutes what countless professionals failed to do. Soraya sat alone in her private study that night, the stars beyond the glass walls glimmering against the vast dark. She held a crystal goblet in her hand, though she had not touched the drink. Her thoughts circled again and again. Why did the human act this way? What gave him that patience? Was it pity, or was it something deeper? Her advisors would laugh at the idea. They saw humans as simple creatures, good for manual labor but little else. In their eyes, humans were reliable because they lacked the cunning of greater species. Yet Soraya had seen something different. The janitor's eyes had not shown weakness. They had shown strength, the quiet kind, the kind that asked for no reward. The next morning, her daughter asked for him. "Where is the one who cleaned with me?" the child whispered, refusing to eat her meal until Daniel's name was spoken. Servants exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. It was unheard of. An alien child of such high birth asking for a human janitor by name. Word spread quickly among the staff. Some mocked the idea quietly, saying it was foolish for the child of Soraya's house to attach herself to a worker. Others grew uneasy, fearing that the billionaire's rivals would twist the story into scandal. But Soraya heard every word, and she remembered the smile on her daughter's face. Later that day, she summoned one of her closest advisors, Lord Valen. He was a tall, stern figure with skin like polished stone and eyes sharp as knives. He had guided her through political battles for years. "You cannot allow this, my lady," Valen said firmly after she explained what happened. "Your child is heir to one of the wealthiest houses in the sector. To be seen clinging to a human, janitor will shame your name, Your rivals will use it against you. Soraya remained silent, her gaze fixed on the stars. You must remove him, Valen pressed. Send him back to the lower decks, or transfer him off the station entirely. End this before it grows into gossip that reaches the council. Soraya's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. She thought of her daughter, her small, fragile body, her rare laughter echoing like sunlight breaking through clouds. She thought of the janitor's gentle tone, the way he had not looked at her child with pity but with warmth. Tell me, Valen, Soraya said quietly, how many times have you seen her smile? Valen hesitated, his lips pressed into a thin line. My lady, that is not... Answer. Soraya cut him off. The advisor lowered his gaze. Rarely, he admitted. Then remember that before you speak again, Soraya said, her voice cold but steady. Valen bowed, retreating without further words. When he was gone, Soraya sat back, alone once more. Her heart was in conflict. On one hand, she had her empire, her name, her reputation, her position that must never appear weak. On the other, she had her child, whose happiness had been unlocked not by riches or power, but by the kindness of a human. The dilemma weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, Daniel went on with his routine, unaware of the storm gathering around him. He scrubbed the dining hall floors, repaired a broken panel in the docking bay, and swept endless corridors. But he began to notice little changes. Servants whispered as he passed. Some stared, some avoided him. A few offered sharp glares. At first, Daniel ignored it. He was used to being overlooked or dismissed. But when the alien child appeared in the hall one day, wheeling herself forward in her floating chair with determination, he understood. She stopped right in front of him, her bright eyes fixed on his face. Then she smiled, shy, but real. You came back, Daniel said softly, crouching to her level. How are you today? The child giggled and pointed at his mop. Clean, she said in her own language, but the translator device on the wall repeated the word in English. Daniel chuckled. Yes, clean. He let her hold the mop handle for a moment, guiding her hand as they pushed it across the floor together. Her laughter echoed down the hall, and nearby servants froze in shock. It was the kind of sound none of them had heard from her in months. That night, Soraya stood once more in the shadows of a balcony, watching her daughter's joy. This time, she did not hide entirely. Her eyes softened as she saw the bond forming. Later, when Daniel returned to the janitor's quarters, exhausted from work, he found himself summoned unexpectedly. Guards escorted him through golden halls he had never been allowed to walk before. He entered a private chamber where Lady Soraya herself waited, seated like a queen upon a silver throne. Daniel froze, unsure if he was in trouble. Do you know who I am? She asked, her voice rich and commanding. Yes, Daniel said quietly. You're Lady Soraya. You helped my daughter, she continued, studying him. Tell me, why? Daniel hesitated, then spoke with honesty. Because she needed help, and because no child should be left to cry alone. His words were simple, without flowery speech, without fear. But they struck her deeper than she expected. Soraya sat in silence, her sharp gaze softening just slightly. She had heard countless diplomats, merchants, and rivals speak in polished phrases to impress her. Yet none of their words weighed as heavily as the janitor's plain truth. When he left, Soraya remained seated, her mind restless. For the first time in years, she was unsure of the right path forward. She had wealth, armies, and titles. But tonight she began to wonder if perhaps true strength was not measured by power, but by kindness. And that realization frightened her more than any rival ever had. Daniel never asked for attention. His life had always been about staying quiet, working hard, and slipping into the background where no one noticed. But after helping the alien child, things began to change in ways he never expected. Everywhere he went on the orbital station, he felt eyes on him. Servants whispered, guards gave longer stares, and even other workers in gray uniforms looked at him with curiosity. He tried to ignore it, focusing on his duties, scrubbing the corridors, repairing light fixtures, and keeping the station spotless. Yet no matter what he did, the child seemed to find him. Her name was Lyra. She was small for her kind, fragile in a way that made her body lean heavily on the floating chair that carried her. Most people treated her like glass, afraid to break her, speaking only in careful tones. But Daniel treated her the way he treated any child, kind, patient, but without fear. Each day, Lyra would wheel herself into the halls while Daniel worked. At first, she only watched him, curious about his tools. But soon she began joining him. She asked to hold his mop, tried to help sweep small corners, and even laughed when she splashed water on her own shoes. Daniel would chuckle and show her how to wring out the mop properly. The servants watched in disbelief. Many of them had never heard Lyra laugh so freely. Some of them smiled secretly when no one else was looking, though others frowned, whispering that this bond was dangerous. One evening, while Daniel polished the marble floor of a gallery, Lyra sat nearby in her chair. She pointed at the stars visible through the massive glass windows. "Tell me of your world," she said in her halting voice, her translator echoing the words in English. Daniel paused, leaning on his mop. "Earth? It's very different. We don't have halls like this or ships this big, but we have forests with trees so tall you can't see the top. And the rain smells fresh when it falls. I used to walk in it barefoot when I was a boy." Lyra's eyes widened. "Rain," she repeated softly as though testing the word. "I have never felt this." Daniel smiled. "Maybe someday you will." She tilted her head, studying him. "Why do you clean? You are kind. You should not be invisible." He shrugged, glancing back at the floor. "Somebody has to do it. And I don't mind. The world feels quieter when I work. And sometimes, small things matter. Clean halls, fixed lights, a safe place, even if no one notices." Lyra fell silent, thinking. Then she said softly, "I notice." Daniel looked at her, surprised. The sincerity in her voice made his chest tighten. He gave her a small nod, grateful. Unbeknownst to him, Lady Soraya had once again been watching. She often stood hidden, observing their conversations. Each word, each laugh between her daughter and the human, shook her more deeply than any council debate. She could not understand why her daughter bloomed only in his presence. Still, her heart warned her of the dangers. The galaxy was cruel to weakness. Rival houses waited for any crack in her armor, any chance to humiliate her. And already rumors spread. Whispers that the mighty Lady Soraya allowed her heir to spend time with a janitor. Some rivals mocked her behind closed doors, calling it shameful. Others prepared to use it as a weapon. That night, Soraya gathered her inner circle. Advisors, generals, and trusted allies filled the chamber. "You must put an end to this," one general said firmly. "If the council learns your daughter prefers the company of a human laborer, they will see it as weakness," another advisor added. "Your enemies will laugh, my lady. They will question your judgment. It could cost you trade agreements, alliances." "Enough," Soraya said sharply, cutting them off. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Do you not see? He has done what all of you could not. My daughter laughs because of him. She lives because of him. And yet you speak only of politics." The chamber fell silent. No one dared respond. Soraya rose from her throne, her elegant form towering over them. "I have bought fleets and crushed markets, but no amount of wealth could buy what that human gave her." A smile. Her voice softened for the first time. "Tell me, what is truly more valuable?" Her words left the room in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Daniel remained unaware of the political storm his presence had created. For him, it was simple. Lyra was a child who deserved joy, and he enjoyed her company more than he admitted. She reminded him of his younger sister, who had once followed him everywhere back on Earth. He found himself telling Lyra little stories of home, simple tales of rivers, of fireflies glowing at night, of his grandmother's bread baking in the oven. Lyra listened with wonder, her wide eyes drinking in every detail. She asked endless questions about Earth, laughing at things Daniel thought were ordinary, but not everyone shared her joy. One afternoon, as Daniel guided Lyra's chair back to her chambers after a long walk through the gardens, two alien nobles blocked their path. They were tall, clad in robes of deep crimson, their faces sharp with arrogance. "What is this?" one sneered. "The heir of House Soraya accompanied by a janitor?" The other smirked cruelly. "How far your house has fallen, little Lyra, to lower yourself to human company." Lyra's hands trembled on her chair's controls, her smile fading. Daniel stepped forward, calm but firm. "Move aside," he said evenly. The nobles laughed. "Listen to him. The human gives orders now." But Daniel did not flinch. He placed himself between them and Lyra, his posture steady, his eyes unshaken. "Mock me if you want, but don't you dare mock her." The noble's laughter faltered at the steel in his voice. For a long moment, tension filled the corridor. Then, with a scoff, they turned and left, their robes swirling behind them. Lyra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but Daniel crouched beside her and gave her a small smile. "Don't listen to them. You're stronger than they'll ever be." She blinked, then smiled again, soft but brave. From a hidden vantage point, Soraya had seen it all. Her heart clenched as she watched the human shield her child from ridicule without hesitation. No guard had moved as quickly as he had. No servant had dared to speak with such courage. Soraya realized something that night as she looked upon her sleeping daughter. For years she had believed power came from wealth, armies, and fear. But now she was beginning to understand a different truth. Sometimes power came from kindness, from standing firm when it mattered most. And it was the human janitor who had shown her this. The worlds of a billionaire and a janitor were never meant to touch. Yet somehow, slowly and unavoidably, they were colliding. The days on the orbital station grew tense. What had begun as a quiet bond between a human janitor and a lonely child was no longer a secret. Rumors spread quickly among the servants and guards, and soon, whispers escaped the private halls into the wider society of the station. At first, it was only idle gossip. The air smiles when the janitor is near. The child refuses caretakers but asks for him. Lady Soraya watches silently, allowing it. But gossip in the halls of the powerful never stayed harmless. Rivals seized upon the whispers, twisting them into weapons. By the end of the week, the entire sector buzzed with talk. A billionaire of the highest house allowing her daughter to be cared for by a human laborer. To her enemies, it was proof of weakness. At a council gathering, rival lords chuckled behind Soraya's back. The great Lady Soraya, reduced to trusting a janitor more than her own kind. One sneered. Another added, "Perhaps humans will sit at the council table next if she continues." Their laughter carried through the chamber, sharp and cruel. Soraya did not flinch. She sat upon her throne, her face carved from stone. But inside a storm churned. Her reputation, built over decades of ruthless precision, was under attack. And all because of a single human whose only crime was kindness. Meanwhile, Daniel had no idea how much trouble his presence had caused. He still carried his mop and tools, still scrubbed the endless floors, still repaired broken vents. The only difference was Lyra's company. She wheeled herself along the halls, laughing as he told stories, asking to help sweep corners, her joy filling the empty chambers with warmth. But one evening, Soraya summoned him. Her chamber was vast and silent, lit by golden lamps that flickered like stars. She sat tall upon her throne, her expression unreadable. Guards lined the walls, their eyes fixed on Daniel as he entered, nervous and unsure. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy. Daniel swallowed. "If I did wrong, my lady, I didn't mean to. You only helped my daughter," Soraya finished, her sharp gaze piercing him. "Yes, but the galaxy sees it differently. To them you have broken the order of things. They mock me because of you." Daniel lowered his eyes, guilt tugging at him. "If you want me gone, I'll go," he said quietly. I never wanted to cause trouble. I couldn't leave her alone. Soraya studied him. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then she spoke softly, almost reluctantly. You would leave, even knowing she needs you? Daniel hesitated. If it protects her, yes. But if I leave, she'll be alone again. And no child should feel that way. Those words struck her like a blade of truth. She dismissed the guards with a wave of her hand. When the chamber was empty, she leaned forward, her voice lower. You speak as though power does not matter. Do you not fear me? Do you not fear what I could do? Daniel met her eyes. His voice was steady. Fear doesn't change what's right. For the first time in years, Soraya found herself unable to respond. That night she walked alone through her private garden, her thoughts heavy. She remembered her rise to power, the countless deals and battles that had forged her empire. She had always believed strength was measured in control, in dominance, in the fear she inspired. Yet the human janitor had stood before her without, trembling, speaking simple truths that weighed more than all the polished speeches of the council. The scandal reached its peak during the grand banquet. Once every cycle, the richest houses gathered in the orbital station's grand hall, a chamber of towering columns and glittering chandeliers. Tables stretched like rivers of gold, piled with exotic foods from across the galaxy. Music echoed through the air as nobles in flowing robes mingled and whispered. Lady Soraya entered with her daughter by her side, Lyra seated proudly in her floating chair. Gasps rippled through the crowd when Daniel followed a few steps behind, dressed not in his gray janitor's uniform but in a simple black tunic given to him by the servants. Whispers filled the air at once. Some laughed, some glared, others watched, with hungry curiosity. Midway through the feast, one of Soraya's rivals, Lord Kareth, stood to speak. He was tall, his voice sharp as a blade. My Lady Soraya, he called loudly, drawing all eyes. It seems your house has found a new protector, not a warrior, not a noble, not even one of our kind, but a human janitor. The hall erupted, in cruel laughter. Kareth smirked, turning his gaze on Lyra. Tell me, child, does your little servant mop away your tears as well as he mops the floors? The laughter grew louder, echoing like knives. Lyra's small hands trembled on her chair. Her eyes glistened with tears, her head lowering as if to hide. Before Soraya could rise, Daniel stepped forward. The laughter died down, surprised by the human's audacity. He stood tall, though his clothes were plain, his face calm but firm. You think strength is mocking a child? Daniel's voice carried clearly through the hall. You think power is measured by how small you can make someone feel? That's not strength. That's cowardice. The hall fell silent. Daniel's eyes swept the nobles, unafraid. Real strength is standing when it's easier to kneel. It's protecting someone weaker, even if the world laughs. You sit here with your gold and jewels, but all I see are people afraid to care. If kindness is weakness, then maybe you should ask yourselves why you fear it so much. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then slowly murmurs spread. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably, others frowned, but many looked thoughtful, their mocking smiles fading. Lord Kareth's face twisted in anger, but he did not reply. Something in Daniel's eyes, unshaken, steady as stone, stole the words from him. Lady Soraya rose then, her gaze sweeping the hall. You laugh at my house, she said coldly, her voice cutting through the silence, but remember this. While you sneer, it was a human who showed more courage than any of you tonight. The hall bowed in silence. Later, in the privacy of her chambers, Soraya looked at Daniel. For the first time, she allowed a small, genuine smile to touch her lips. You spoke as though you were born to stand before lords, she said. Daniel shook his head. No, my lady. I spoke as someone who knows what it's like to be small. That's why I'll always protect her. Soraya's heart stirred in a way she had not felt in years. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not a janitor, not a human laborer, but a man who had shown the galaxy what strength really meant. and she knew then that the choice before her was no longer about reputation. It was about truth. The banquet ended in silence. The nobles left the grand hall with whispers on their lips, but the laughter was gone. Daniel's words lingered like an echo they could not shake. Some were angry, others ashamed, but all of them had seen the human stand against them without fear. Lady Soraya walked beside her daughter, her robes flowing like fire. Daniel followed a few steps behind, quiet but steady. When they entered her private chambers, the guards were dismissed. For the first time, the three of them were alone. Lyra turned her floating chair toward Daniel. Her small face glowed with admiration. "You were brave," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly, crouching to meet her eyes. "I wasn't brave, I was just telling the truth." Soraya stood tall, her gaze shifting between the two. Her chest tightened with a strange feeling, something rare, something she had almost forgotten existed. She had built her empire on fear, but tonight it was a human's courage that saved her house from shame. "Do you know what you have done?" she asked Daniel quietly. He rose to his feet, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I protected her. That's all I'll ever do." For a long time, Soraya did not speak. She studied him, seeing not the gray-clad worker she once overlooked, but the man who had given her daughter laughter, dignity, and safety. Finally, she turned toward her daughter, who waited silently, her eyes filled with hope. And in that moment, Lady Soraya made her choice. The very next day, Soraya summoned her council. Nobles, generals, and advisors filled the chamber once again, expecting reprimands or strategy after the scandal. Instead, they found Daniel standing beside her throne. Gasps echoed through the hall. "This human," Soraya began, her voice sharp and commanding, "is no longer a janitor. He is guardian of my heir. His word will be law when it comes to her safety. Anyone who dares question him questions me." The hall exploded in murmurs, outrage flashing in many eyes. Lord Valen, her closest advisor, stepped forward, his voice tight. "My lady, this is dangerous. To elevate a human—" "Enough," Soraya cut him off, her eyes glowing. "Do you not see? While you sat in your pride, mocking weakness, he was the only one who stood, the only one who defended her. None of you dared. Tell me, who among you deserves this place more than him?" No one answered. Silence stretched like a blade. Soraya turned to Daniel. "From this day you are no longer invisible. You are family to this house. Protect my daughter as you would your own." Daniel was stunned. He had never wanted honor, never dreamed of power. But when he looked at Lyra, her small hands clasped in joy, he knew what mattered most. He bowed his head slightly. "I'll protect her with my life." Lyra laughed, a bright, happy sound that filled the chamber. Even Soraya's cold heart warmed. The days that followed were unlike anything Daniel had known. No longer confined. To the lower decks, he walked beside Lady Soraya and her daughter openly. Guards saluted him, servants bowed. Some nobles still sneered behind his back, but none dared openly challenge him. He learned quickly what his new role meant. He accompanied Lyra to her lessons, guided her chair through gardens, and told her Earth stories until she fell asleep. He even stood guard during council sessions, silent but steady, a reminder to all that the human was now part of House Soraya. But more than duties, Daniel gave Lyra something priceless: normalcy. He played games with her, teased her gently when she pouted, and reminded her she was not fragile glass but a child who deserved joy. And slowly, Lyra grew stronger. She smiled more, laughed more, even tried to move her weak hands with determination, encouraged by his faith in her. Soraya watched these changes with awe. She had invested fortunes in medicine, technology, and luxury to ease her daughter's life, but none of it had brought the spark Daniel gave so freely. At night, she often found herself staring at the stars, wondering if perhaps her wealth had blinded her to the simplest truth: that kindness could change destiny. Of course, enemies did not stay silent. Rival houses spread new whispers. Soraya has lost her mind, letting a human stand by her throne. Some plotted to test Daniel, to provoke him into mistakes. One night, as Daniel walked Lyra through a quiet corridor, 3 masked intruders emerged from the shadows. Blades shimmered in their hands. "Step aside, human," one hissed. "You are nothing. She does not belong in this world." Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not move. He placed himself in front of Lyra's chair, his body shielding hers. His voice was steady. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The intruders laughed, but their laughter froze when Soraya herself stepped from the shadows, her guards behind her. She had expected such treachery. The intruders were seized in moments. Soraya's eyes fell on Daniel. Even knowing danger, he had not wavered. For her, it was the final proof. That night, she spoke to him in private. "You are different from all the men I have known," she admitted. "They bow, they flatter, they plot. But you protect. Without question, without fear." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not special, my lady. I'm just a man who couldn't watch a child be hurt." Soraya studied him, her heart stirring again. "Perhaps that is what makes you special." Months passed. Daniel's presence became a constant, not only in Lyra's life but in Soraya's heart. The galaxy still whispered, but the whispers began to change. Where once they mocked, now they spoke of the human who silenced nobles with truth, who stood like a shield against danger, and slowly, respect replaced ridicule. One evening, in the grand hall where their story began, Soraya stood beside her daughter and Daniel. She looked at the nobles gathered before her and spoke clearly. "You all measure power in wealth, fleets, and fear. But tonight I tell you this: power is also found in kindness, in courage, in standing when others fall silent. And it was a human who taught me this truth." The hall bowed in silence, not daring to argue. Lyra smiled proudly at Daniel, whispering, "You are my guardian." Soraya looked at him as well, her eyes softer than ever. For once, the mighty billionaire did not see him as lesser. She saw him as equal. And Daniel, though still the same man in his heart, realized his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a janitor. He was the protector of a child who gave him purpose, and the trusted companion of a woman who ruled with iron yet had learned the strength of compassion. In a galaxy ruled by pride and power, one human janitor had changed everything, armed with nothing but kindness and the courage to stand.